The rhythmic beeping of hospital monitors was the first sound Emma registered. Her eyelids fluttered open to a sterile white ceiling, the harsh lighting making her wince. She tried to turn her head, expecting to see the crowded room she had imagined during her semi-conscious state. Friends clutching coffee cups, family members asleep in uncomfortable chairs, maybe even flowers accumulating on the windowsill. But there was nothing, no one. The room stood empty except for her, and the machinery keeping track of her vital signs. Her phone lay on the bedside table, screen dark and silent. No notifications, no missed calls, no text messages asking how she was doing. When Emma opened her eyes, she realized everyone had left her. The thought settled like a stone in her stomach. Just 3 weeks ago, her social media had been filled with birthday wishes, her apartment overflowing with guests celebrating her promotion. The same people who had raised champagne glasses to her success were nowhere to be found now that she was at her lowest. Have you ever noticed how people disappear when your life stops looking successful? Emma reached for her phone with a trembling hand, scrolling through her contacts. Dozens of names. Friends from college, co-workers, neighbors, her weekly spin class group. People she had helped move apartments, whose pets she had watched, whose shoulders she had let them cry on during breakups and family crises. Support feels unconditional until it costs something. She had always been there for them, always. And now, in this sterile room with nothing but the mechanical companions of medical equipment, not a single one had shown up for her. A warm pressure on her right hand made her jump. She had not even noticed someone was holding it. Emma turned her head, blinking away tears that had begun to form. "You're awake," said a voice, soft with relief. She blinked twice before the face came into focus. Dark circles hung beneath his eyes, his normally neat hair disheveled, as if he had been running his hands through it repeatedly. Ryan, of all people. Her best friend is Lily's younger brother. The same Ryan she had barely acknowledged at family gatherings during her years of friendship with Lily. The same Ryan who had once told her, quietly and without expectation, that he thought she was worth more than the life she was performing. She had laughed it off then, too busy curating her image to take seriously a man she considered simply Lily's kid brother. Yet here he was, holding her hand as if no time had passed at all. "How long have you been here?" Emma's voice came out hoarse, barely audible. "Since they called me," he replied, reaching for a cup of water and helping her take a small sip. "About 36 hours now." "They called you?" She could not hide her confusion. "Why would they call you?" A flicker of something crossed Ryan's face. Hurt, perhaps, or resignation. "Lily listed me as your secondary emergency contact before she moved to London," he explained. "When no one else answered. The hospital tried me. No one else answered." The words echoed in her mind, each repetition more painful than the last. Emma looked at their joined hands, then back at Ryan's tired face. There was no judgment there. No satisfaction at seeing her abandoned by the crowd she had always prioritized over quieter, more genuine people. Just concern, and something else she could not quite name. But what if the one person who stayed was the one she never expected? "Why?" she whispered, not trusting her voice with more than a single word. Ryan seemed to understand the question behind the question. "Why are you here? Why did you come? Why would you help me after I spent years barely noticing you existed?" He shrugged slightly, a small, sad smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Some things matter more than whether someone noticed you, Emma." The simplicity of his answer made her throat tighten. As she looked at him, really looked at him, Emma realized she had more questions than answers about how she had ended up here, about what had happened, about why Lily's brother was the only one sitting vigil at her bedside. And as the morning light began to stream through the hospital blinds, illuminating the empty chairs around her bed, Emma felt the first stirrings of a terrible and clarifying understanding. 3 weeks before the hospital room, before the beeping monitors and empty chairs, Emma's life had sparkled with a kind of promise that photographs well. Her apartment, a sleek one-bedroom in the city's most coveted neighborhood, bore all the hallmarks of someone who had made it. Clean lines, minimalist decor, floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the city below. Every item had its place. Every surface gleamed. It was the kind of organized perfection that made her colleagues gasp with envy during dinner parties. Those dinner parties had become a staple of her weekly routine. Friday evenings meant hosting her carefully cultivated circle of friends, people she had selected as deliberately as furniture, chosen for what they reflected back at her rather than what they genuinely offered. They arrived precisely at 7, bearing expensive wine and compliments about her latest professional accomplishment. They stayed until exactly 11, never overstaying, never getting too personal, never disrupting the carefully maintained balance of her life. To Emma, Jason had toasted at her promotion celebration, "The most put-together person we know." Put together. She had beamed at the words then. Now they felt like an indictment. Her phone buzzed. Mark, her boyfriend of 8 months, was running late again. "The client meeting dragged on," he explained when he finally arrived, kissing her cheek with the precision of someone performing affection rather than feeling it. "But I brought you something." The small velvet box contained diamond earrings that caught the light in dazzling patterns. Not a ring, not yet, but the promise of one hovered unspoken between them. "They're beautiful," she said, fastening them to her ears. "Only the best for you." Mark squeezed her hand. "I've been thinking about forever lately. About us, forever." The word should have thrilled her. Instead, it sat uncomfortably, like a dress that no longer fit quite right. Later that night, after everyone had gone and Mark had fallen asleep beside her, Emma lay awake staring at the ceiling. The promotion that had everyone raising glasses came with whispers she could not ignore. Rumors that the real reason for her advancement had less to do with her quarterly numbers and more to do with the executive director's personal interest in her. "Of course people will talk," her supervisor had said dismissively. "That's what happens when you're young, female, and successful. Get used to it." But she saw the glances, felt the shift in conversations when she entered rooms. Achievements that once felt earned now seemed tainted by doubt she could not scrub away. And then there was Lily. "I'm moving to London next month," Lily had announced over their monthly brunch, her eyes bright with excitement. 2-year contract, possibly permanent. Emma had forced enthusiasm into her voice while something quiet and essential cracked inside her. Lily was the one person who had known her before the designer clothes and downtown apartment, who remembered when Emma lived on ramen noodles and stubborn determination. Lily's departure felt like losing the last witness to who she actually was. "You'll visit, right?" Lily had asked. "Of course," Emma promised. Before leaving, Lily had mentioned almost in passing that she was updating Emma's emergency contacts. "I'm putting Ryan down as secondary, since I'll be so far away. He won't mind." Emma had nodded without really listening, the way she did with logistical details that did not seem to matter. She had met Ryan at enough of Lily's family dinners to recognize his face, had exchanged pleasantries, and had absorbed Lily's occasional mentions of him. She knew vaguely that he worked in technology, that he was quieter than Lily, that he had once said something to her at a Christmas party that she had been too distracted to properly hear. She had not thought of him since. As weeks passed after Lily's departure, Emma's carefully constructed life continued to display all the external markers of success, while internally the cracks spread wider. She stopped hosting Friday gatherings, declined weekend invitations, let calls go to voicemail. Even Mark noticed, commenting that she seemed somewhere else when they were together. The night of the accident, rain pounded against her windshield as Emma drove home from another late night at the office. Her phone sat in the passenger seat, opened to her contacts. 3 calls were made on her drive. Her mother, straight to voicemail. "Mark, hey, can't talk now, at dinner with clients." Lily, no answer, different time zone now. Emma wiped away tears, the road blurring before her. The loneliness felt physical, a pressure in her chest making it hard to breathe. How had she built a life so full of people yet so utterly empty of connection? And somewhere beneath that question, a darker one. Had she done this to herself? The curve in the road came faster than she anticipated. Her headlights illuminated sheets of rain. She hit the brakes, too late. Emma stared at the hospital ceiling, tracking the slow movement of time by watching shadows shift across the textured tiles. 3 days had passed since she had awakened to find Ryan at her bedside. 3 days of tests, concerned doctors, and the persistent absence of anyone else. Her phone pinged. After hours of silence, the sound startled her enough that she fumbled to reach it. The message was from Mark. "Hey, heard what happened. I need some space to process this. We'll check in later." Space. He needed space. Emma read the message 3 times, trying to find something between the lines that might soften the blow. There was nothing. Just 12 cold words from the man who had spoken of forever 3 weeks ago. Ryan returned from the cafeteria, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He noticed her expression immediately. "What happened?" he asked, setting the cups down. Emma handed him the phone wordlessly. His jaw tightened as he read the message. "Well," she said with forced lightness. "At least he responded." "That's not a response," Ryan said quietly. "That's a disappearing act with punctuation." Her phone chimed again. This time a group message from her dinner party friends, a generic "get well soon," followed by a stock image of flower, not real flower. They had not bothered to send actual ones. Just a digital picture of them, the social media equivalent of a shrug. By evening, Emma had received 14 messages and 0 visitors. "They're probably just busy," she said to Ryan, who had not left except to bring food or coffee. "Everyone has their own lives." He did not argue, but his silence said everything. The doctor came in for evening rounds, reviewing her charts efficiently. "Any family coming to help with discharge planning? You'll need someone at home for the first few days." Emma opened her mouth to assure him that yes, of course she had people, but the lie would not form. Her throat tightened, and to her horror, tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'll handle it," Ryan said quietly, his hand finding hers again. After the doctor left, Emma could not stop crying. Months of carefully maintained composure crumbled as reality settled over her. Her phone sat silent now, the brief flurry of obligatory concern having passed like weather. No one was coming. No one cared enough to disrupt their routines. "I don't understand," she whispered between sobs. "I was there for all of them. Every time they needed something, I showed up. What did I do wrong?" Ryan shook his head. "You didn't do anything wrong." "Then why?" Her voice broke. "Why am I suddenly not worth their time?" "Because some people only value what you can give them," he said. "And right now, you need instead of give." That's all it took to empty the room. Emma wiped at her tears, embarrassment heating her cheeks. "I must be exhausting to love," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Something shifted in Ryan's expression. Not pity, but a quiet, fierce certainty. "Don't do that," he said, his voice more direct than she had ever heard it. "Don't take their failures and make them your fault. You are not difficult to care about, Emma. These people never loved you. They loved what you represented. The success, the apartment, the status. The second you needed something instead of providing everything, they were gone. That's not your flaw, that's their poverty." His words landed with the weight of truth she had been avoiding. "Why are you still here then?" she whispered. "You barely know me. I barely knew you existed until 3 days ago, and I'm ashamed to admit that." Ryan looked at her steadily. "Lily loves you," he said simply. "That was enough for me to come. And then I got here, and I saw someone who deserved better than an empty room. That was enough to stay." He said it without drama, without expectation of reward, just a clean and honest accounting of why he had chosen to be there. "And staying," he added quietly, "turned out to be easier than I expected. If you believe loyalty matters, even when it's inconvenient, subscribe to follow Emma's journey. Have you ever been abandoned when you needed someone most? Share your experience in the comments below. On the 4th morning of her hospital stay, Emma woke to hushed voices outside her room. She recognized Ryan's low, measured tone immediately, though the words themselves were indistinct. The other voice belonged to her doctor. The doctor nodded with what seemed like particular deference as he entered and reviewed her charts. Later, A nurse adjusting her four leaned slightly closer and said, "You're very fortunate to have him here," with a meaningful glance toward Ryan. "Not everyone gets this level of attention." Emma frowned. "What do you mean?" The nurse looked briefly surprised, then composed herself. "The foundation that funded our cardiac wing. He chairs it. He's also on the hospital board." This was not the Ryan that Emma had constructed in her mind from Lily's scattered mentions. She had imagined Lily's brother as comfortable, quietly successful perhaps, a background figure in a life she had never bothered to examine closely. After the nurse left, Emma studied him more carefully. His clothes were simple dark trousers and a plain sweater, but she now recognized the subtle markers of exceptional quality that she had spent years training herself to notice. His watch was understated yet unmistakably significant. Even the way he moved through the hospital had a quality to it, not arrogance, but the quiet ease of someone accustomed to consequence. "Something wrong?" Ryan asked, catching her stare. "The nurse mentioned the foundation," Emma said carefully, "and the board." A flash of discomfort crossed his face. "My company went public 2 years ago," he said, delivering the understatement with the practiced calm of someone who had learned that the number itself was not the point. "It was a larger outcome than I anticipated." "How large?" she pressed. He hesitated. "Significant enough that people started treating me differently, which is mostly why I don't mention it." Emma looked around the hospital room, at the quiet efficiency with which things had been handled since Ryan arrived, the paperwork she had never been asked to sign, the quality of the food that had appeared at mealtimes, the particular attentiveness of the staff. "And you didn't lead with any of this," she said slowly. "Would it have changed something?" he asked. The question hung between them, clean and uncomfortable. Emma thought about it honestly. She had spent years calibrating her attention toward people with status and resources. She had built an entire social architecture around proximity to success. If Ryan had walked into her life leading with $1 billion exit and a hospital foundation, she knew with painful clarity exactly how she would have responded. "Yes," she admitted, "it probably would have. And that's something I need to sit with." Ryan looked at her for a moment, something shifting in his expression. Respect, perhaps, or quiet surprise. "That's the most honest thing I've heard in a long time," he said. "I'm practicing," Emma replied. Throughout the day, she watched him with new and more complicated awareness. He moved through the hospital with quiet purpose, never drawing attention to himself, yet somehow ensuring things happened. He did not pull rank or perform generosity. He adjusted her pillows when she winced, brought ice chips when her medication left her mouth dry, and held her hand through a particularly painful procedure without being asked. The wealth was real, but it was clearly not the most interesting thing about him. When a night nurse came to take her vitals at 2 a.m, Emma lay still with her eyes partially open. Ryan had fallen asleep in the chair beside her bed, his head tilted back against the wall, one hand still loosely holding hers. In sleep, his face lost the careful composure he maintained while awake. He looked younger, less guarded, and Emma, watching him in the pale blue light of the monitors, felt something shift quietly inside her chest. Not the blazing attraction she had felt for Mark, not the comfortable familiarity of her friend group, but something steadier, something that felt strangely like the first solid ground she had stood on in a very long time. Her fingers tightened around him as sleep reclaimed her. Rain tapped against the hospital window in a gentle, persistent rhythm. 5 days after the accident, Emma was finally being discharged. Ryan stood by the door, speaking quietly with her doctor about follow-up care, while a nurse reviewed her medication schedule. "Ready to go home?" Ryan asked, returning to her bedside. Emma hesitated. Home meant her empty apartment. Home meant the silence of her phone, and the reality of how completely her social circle had dissolved the moment she stopped being useful to it. "I've arranged for a home health aide to check on you daily," Ryan continued, "just until you're steady." "Thank you," she said, the words inadequate for everything he had done, for all of this, for staying, for being here when you had absolutely no obligation to be. Outside, the rain intensified. Emma watched the drops race each other down the glass. "Why did Lily never talk about you more?" Emma asked. "She mentioned you, but never really. I feel like I missed something obvious." Ryan considered this with the measured patience she had come to recognize as characteristic of him. "Lily talks about the people she loves in proportion to how certain she is they'll be received," he said. "I think she wasn't always sure how you'd receive me." The honesty of it landed without cruelty, but Emma felt it nonetheless. "I wasn't always easy to bring real things to," she said. "No," Ryan agreed simply, neither softening it nor making it worse. "But you're different now." Something opened. "Almost dying has a way of doing that," Emma said with a short, rueful sound that was almost a laugh. "I think it started before the accident," Ryan said. "I think you were already cracking before the car left the road." Emma looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" "You called 3 people that night, and no one answered," he said quietly. "That's not just bad luck. That was the end of something you'd already been feeling for a long time. The accident was when you finally stopped being able to pretend otherwise." The accuracy of it was breathtaking. Emma turned it over in her mind as the orderly arrived with her wheelchair, as Ryan handled the discharge paperwork, as they moved through the hospital corridors toward the gray, wet day outside. She had not been in a car accident that caused a crisis. She had been in a crisis that caused a car accident. The distinction mattered enormously. Have you ever realized the breaking point wasn't the beginning of the problem? It was just the moment you finally couldn't look away. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. The days following Emma's return home established a quiet routine. May, the home health aide Ryan had arranged, arrived each morning to check Emma's vitals and guide her through physical therapy exercises. Ryan appeared every evening after work, carrying groceries or takeout, staying for a few hours before leaving at a reasonable hour with a consistency that asked nothing of her. "You don't have to keep doing this," Emma told him on the 7th day, watching as he unpacked containers of soup from her favorite restaurant, which she had mentioned only once, in passing. "I know," he replied simply. Her apartment, once a showcase of curated perfection, now showed signs of actual living. Throw blankets remained unfolded on the couch. Books accumulated on the coffee table. A collection of tea mugs. Ryan brought her a different herbal blend each evening, lined the kitchen counter. "This place used to look like a design magazine," Emma commented. "It used to look like no one lived here," Ryan said, filling the kettle. "Now it looks like someone's home." One evening, Emma finally asked the question she had been circling for days. "Did Lily know that you came to the hospital?" "She was the first person I called when the hospital reached me," Ryan said. "She was on the next possible flight to London already when I told her you were stable. She wanted to come back immediately." "You told her not to," Emma guessed. "I told her you were being looked after and that upending her contract wasn't necessary," he said. "She made me promise to report to her twice daily. I have been." Emma felt something loosen in her chest. Lily had not abandoned her. Lily was thousands of miles away, fielding twice daily updates from her brother, trusting him with the person she loved. That was its own form of presence, its own form of loyalty expressed through the person she had sent. "I owe Lily a very long phone call," Emma said softly. "She knows," Ryan replied. They sat in a comfortable quiet, the city moving outside the windows, the tea steaming between their hands. Emma found herself watching Ryan, with the particular attention of someone learning a new language, trying to understand the grammar of a person she had looked past for years. "Tell me something I don't know about you," she said. "Something real." Ryan looked up from his mug. "I was terrified the entire first night at the hospital," he said, without any performance of casualness. "I'd met you maybe 6 times in 7 years. I didn't know if you'd be angry when you woke up. I didn't know if you'd want me there. I sat there for hours trying to figure out if I was overstepping and deciding that, even if I was, I'd rather overstep than leave someone alone in a hospital." The vulnerability of it, delivered so plainly, without any bid for credit, moved her more than any grand declaration could have. "That was the right call," Emma said softly. "I know that now." he replied. On the 10th evening, Ryan looked up from his laptop to find her watching him. "What?" he asked, a smile at the corners of his mouth. "I'm trying to figure out how I missed you for so many years," Emma said honestly. Ryan closed the laptop. "You weren't looking in my direction." "I was looking in all the wrong directions," she corrected. The air between them shifted, subtle but unmistakable. Emma felt something she recognized as possibility. Not the feverish urgency she had mistaken for connection in her previous relationships, but something quieter, something that felt like it could hold weight. "I'm not the same person I was before the accident," she said. "I want you to know that I know that. And I'm not asking you to trust the person I was. I'm asking you to watch the person I'm becoming." Ryan looked at her steadily. "I've been watching," he said. "That's why I'm still here." Have you ever helped someone without realizing how deeply it mattered? Share your experience in the comments below. Autumn arrived and painted the city in rich golds and deep reds. Emma walked through the park near her apartment 6 months after the accident, breathing in air that tasted of wood smoke and turned leaves, noticing how differently she moved through the world now. Her external life had changed substantially. She had left her high-pressure position for a role at a smaller organization, doing work that connected to something real in her. The salary was lower. Her days no longer stretched into endless nights fueled by anxiety and the desperate need to appear indispensable. She had time to read again, to cook meals that were not performances, to call Lily every Sunday for an hour without checking her phone for notifications mid-conversation. Her social circle had contracted to something small and genuine. A colleague named Priya, who had sent a single handwritten card to the hospital rather than a group text, who had called once a week since then just to check in, who remembered details without being reminded. An old college friend named Sam, who had driven 4 hours when he heard what happened, arrived unannounced with food and the particular comfort of someone who had known her before she became a brand. There had been one surprise among the people she had written off. Her former co-worker James, whose goodbye in the group chat she had interpreted as performance, had sent a separate message 2 weeks into her recovery. "I tried to visit the hospital, but they said you weren't taking visitors. I should have tried harder. I'm sorry. Can I bring lunch sometime?" She had said yes. They had eaten sandwiches on her couch, while she still wore the compression bandage on her wrist. It had been genuinely awkward and genuinely kind, and she was glad she had not dismissed him entirely. Most of the others had not reached out again. Emma found she could hold this without bitterness now, without the urgent need to understand or assign blame. They were who they were. She had chosen them for the wrong reasons. That was a lesson paid for at significant cost. But it was paid, and she did not intend to forget it. Ryan was waiting on their usual bench, 2 coffee cups in hand. He stood as she approached, handing her the cup prepared exactly as she liked it, which still caught her off guard sometimes, the ease with which he remembered things she had mentioned only once. "How was the board interview?" he asked, as they fell into step together. Emma had applied for a position on the advisory board of a nonprofit focused on economic access for first-generation college students, something she would never have considered in her previous life, when every career move was calculated for maximum prestige return. "Good, I think," she said. "They're doing real work." It felt like a conversation instead of an audition. They walked in a companionable quiet, leaves crunching beneath their feet. Emma had come to understand that she and Ryan were fluent in silence in a way she had never been with anyone else. She had always filled quiet with noise before, performing engagement, demonstrating her wit, making sure she was being well received. With Ryan, she could simply exist alongside someone without the work of it. "Can I ask you something?" Emma said as they reached the small pond at the center of the park. "Always," Ryan said. "Did you ever tell Lily about how things have developed between us?" Ryan was quiet for a moment. "She asked me directly about 3 months ago," he said. "I told her the truth." "What did she say?" A slow smile crossed his face. "She said, and I'm quoting exactly, that it was about time the 2 most stubborn people she loved figured out they were in the same orbit." He paused. "And then she told me that if I hurt you, she would fly back from London specifically to be furious at me in person." Emma laughed, a real laugh that rose from somewhere unguarded. "That's very Lily." "She also said," Ryan continued, his voice gentling, "that she thinks you are the bravest person she knows, not because of anything you've accomplished, because of what you were willing to let go of and rebuild from." Emma felt the words settle somewhere deep. She thought about the person who had hosted those dinner parties, who had chosen every relationship for what it reflected rather than what it held, who had driven through rain crying because she had no one real to call. That person was not a villain. She had been frightened and lonely and performing strength so continuously that she had forgotten what actual strength felt like. Actual strength, she had learned, felt like Ryan's hand finding hers on a bench in an autumn park. It felt like Lily's voice on Sunday mornings. It felt like choosing the smaller apartment, the more meaningful work, the genuine conversation over the impressive one. "I keep thinking about that night," Emma said. "The accident. I called 3 people and no one answered. And I used to think the lesson was that those people failed me. And now?" Ryan asked. "Now I think the lesson is that I had spent years building relationships that could only hold good weather," she said, "and I was the architect. I chose people who reflected the image I wanted to project instead of people who actually knew me. That was mine to own." Ryan looked at her. "That's a hard thing to admit." "It's easier than staying lost," she replied. When his hand found hers, fingers intertwining with easy certainty, Emma felt the particular quiet of something real, not the dazzling early urgency she had once confused for depth, but something that had been tested by uncomfortable truths and chosen anyway. Something that knew her actual shape and was not frightened by it. "I want to say something," she said, looking at him directly. "Not because the moment calls for it, or because it sounds right. Because it's true." Ryan waited. "I see you clearly," Emma said. "Not the foundation or the board seat or the outcome that made you someone people treat differently. You. The person who sat in an uncomfortable hospital chair for 36 hours for someone he barely knew because Lily loved her. The person who brought different tea every night and never once made me feel like a project. I see that person, and that person is who I am choosing." Ryan was quiet for a long moment. Around them the park continued its gentle hum, joggers on the path, ducks on the water, the city breathing in autumn. "I've been choosing you since the hospital," he said finally. "Every day. It gets easier and more certain. That's not something I've felt before." Emma leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him. In the trees above them a bird called once and went silent. The coffee had gone cool in her other hand, and she did not care even slightly. "This," she thought, "is what I was actually looking for the entire time. Not the dinner parties, or the diamond earrings, or the man who talked about forever, while being constitutionally unable to show up for a Tuesday. This. Someone who sits with you in the difficult weather and asks nothing back for it. Who stayed for you when everyone else left. Share this story with someone whose loyalty has never wavered. And subscribe for weekly stories about love, loyalty, and the life lessons that matter most." 1 year after the accident, Emma stood at the window of her new apartment, watching snow drift from a pearl-gray sky. The space was smaller than her previous showcase, a conscious choice. Less room to fill with impressive possessions meant more space for what actually mattered. Behind her, Ryan moved around the kitchen preparing dinner with the easy familiarity of someone who had learned the geography of a shared life. The sound of it, the particular domestic music of someone cooking in your kitchen while snow fell outside, still sometimes surprised her with its comfort. Her phone rang. Lily's name lit up the screen. "Tell me everything," Lily said without preamble. "Starting with whether you are happy?" Emma looked at Ryan, who had glanced over from the stove with a question in his eyes. She smiled at him. He smiled back and returned to what he was doing. "Yes," Emma said into the phone. "I think I actually am." "Good," Lily said, and Emma could hear the relief in her voice, genuine and uncomplicated. "You had me worried for a while there. Not just the accident. Before. You were disappearing into something that didn't look like you." "I know," Emma said. "I was performing a version of myself I thought was required. It turned out not to be sustainable, Nothing that isn't real is sustainable, Lily said simply. I should have said that more clearly when I had you in front of me. I'm sorry I moved away when I did. You built something extraordinary, Emma said. That wasn't abandonment. That was your life happening. I understand the difference now. They talked for an hour, the way they had been talking every Sunday for 6 months, with the ease of people who had chosen to maintain something rather than let distance quietly dissolve it. After they hung up, Emma sat for a moment holding the phone, feeling the fullness of a life that had been emptied and then rebuilt with better materials. Ryan set a bowl of something warm on the coffee table beside her. Good call? He asked. The best kind, Emma replied. The kind where nothing needs to be performed. He sat down beside her, and they ate in the comfortable quiet that had become the particular language of their life together. Outside, the snow accumulated on windowsills and car roofs and the bare branches of the trees lining the street. Inside, the lamps made pools of warm light. Emma thought about what she had believed a year ago, that loyalty was what people promised. She thought about 14 messages and 0 visitors. She thought about 12 cold words from a man who had spoken of forever. She thought about a group text containing a photograph of flowers that no one had bothered to actually send. And she thought about a man she had barely known sitting in an uncomfortable hospital chair for 36 hours because someone he loved her. She thought about twice daily updates relayed faithfully across an ocean. She thought about a card handwritten by a colleague, a 4-hour drive from an old friend, an awkward sandwich eaten on her couch by someone willing to try again. Loss had cleared the room. That was the truth of it. But clearing is not only destruction. Sometimes a room needs to be emptied before you can see what it was built to hold. I keep thinking about promises, Emma said finally. Ryan looked at her. Everyone in my old life was full of them, she continued. Forever. Always. I'll be there. Beautiful words. But words don't sit with you at 2 a.m. Words don't bring different tea every night to figure out which one you like best. Words don't drive 4 hours unannounced or send a card when a group text would have been easier. She turned to face him. Presence is the only promise that means anything. Showing up when it costs you something. When there's nothing obvious to gain. When the person you're showing up for can barely offer anything back. She paused. That's the only real thing. Everything else is just language. Ryan held her gaze for a long moment. The snow continued outside, quiet and without apology, covering the city in something clean. I'm not going anywhere, he said. And the beautiful thing, the thing that distinguished it entirely from every promise she had collected before, was that he had already proven it. Not with words first, with 36 hours in an uncomfortable chair, with different tea every evening, with twice daily calls relayed to London, with a choice made quietly, repeatedly, without requiring an audience for it. Emma reached for his hand. He was already reaching for hers. Who stayed for you when everyone else left? Share this story with someone whose loyalty has never wavered. Subscribe for weekly stories about love, loyalty, and the life lessons that matter most.